Good morning and welcome to this week's Inside Workplace Wellbeing, where I speak to people about topics, all things wellbeing in the workplace. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Danielle Serpico, who is a mentor, an NLP master trainer and hypnotist, specializing in communication, self-leadership and influence, helping entrepreneurs, coaches and professionals master the art of persuasion, sales and self-worth. Danielle believes that our ability to communicate both to ourselves and others determines our level of self-worth and therefore our wealth and fulfillment. Danielle, you are so welcome.
Delighted to be here with you, Dolores. Very excited.
So this conversation is all about how our words and communications shape our well-being. And this really, to me, is huge in the workplace, the whole topic around communication. I mean, communication is obviously important in all our lives. And I suppose what I want people to take away from this conversation is what we're talking about. Although we have a slant on workplace, these tools can be used in all areas of our lives, our relationships, etc. So before we go into it, Danielle, can you talk to us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you are today? And then we'll dive into the whole, because I'm sure there's a connection between the Danielle of when she was 5 or 6, the Danielle of 17, 18, and the Danielle of now.
Wow, there is a connection, and it's amazing when you think back to the different versions of each of us. So the short version is I never knew how I communicated with myself until I was 36 years of age. At that point, I had just closed the last of my businesses. My businesses had collapsed in the crash of the Celtic Tiger, and I had had 3 restaurants and a gift shop. So I had a little empire going, and I'd had that going for 17 years. So I'd been in business since I was 19. And when everything fell apart and I lost everything, I went on to go bankrupt and lost my home, lost absolutely everything. It was only then that I realized that all of it came down to how I was communicating with myself, and then hence how I communicated with others. Now, I would have been somebody who would have thought themselves a natural leader. And in some ways I was, and I talk a lot about the difference between confidence and self-worth, because I was confident because I had to be. And maybe you can relate to this because sometimes we just have to get on with things, and we have to survive, and we have to graft, and we have to do the to get by. But confidence comes from doing. You do something often enough and you get confident at doing that. But that has very little relevance to how you feel inside about yourself. And it was only when everything collapsed and my businesses went under and the mask came off, so to speak, that I realized that all of it had, well, a lot of it, I mean, the crash of the Celtic Tiger had something to do with it. But a lot of it really deep down came down to how I felt about myself and how I was feeling on a day-to-day basis, and then hence how I was communicating how with myself and how I was communicating with others. So that led me, in a nutshell, on a journey of self-discovery. Although that might sound corny, it was very practical, and it resulted in huge stuff in my life, and it led me to what I do now today. But it was started with learning how I spoke to myself.
And that's huge, and I think it's awful even at this stage where, and I know it's not with everyone, but like in 2025, we're still saying, we're still almost apologizing for this. And you said like it might sound corny. And I know I do it as well myself because I think there is still a perception out there of the fluffy work. And maybe not so more with the younger generations. And I'm not, of course, I'm just talking about, I suppose, generally as well. I think that, and I talk about this intergenerational in workplaces a lot. We have our growth mindset and we have our fixed mindset. That whole fluffy, corny bit, I think that can really definitely, when we hold that fixed mindset around, oh, this self-mastery and this self-discovery is all that fluffy, that is so wrong and holding us back so much.
It is true. And one of the things that I really realized, that our success in life, in our business and in our careers, is only relevant to the value we place on ourselves. And yes, sometimes a lot of the time, we tend to want to be focusing on the outside result, and we want to get to X result, whatever that might be, in our position, in our leadership, in our careers, etc. But we're focusing so much on the outside result because we think that's more practical. But in reality, if we actually break it down in really simple terms, if you want to get from one side of the river to the other side of the river, and you're crossing over the stepping stones, you've got to take each step. You can't get to here without first doing this step and this step. And this step here is the inner work.
Yeah, totally. Because you gave a statistic, and I know you did 2 articles for my Inside Workplace Wellbeing newsletter on LinkedIn this week, and you mentioned that 95% of our thoughts and emotions are driven by the subconscious. So this whole subconscious piece, and I know this is my world as well. I love this because as a coach myself, I love digging and deeping into my own subconscious as well as helping others. But my question to you around this statistic that you gave, that 95% of our thoughts are driven by our subconscious, how do you advise leaders become more aware of how their subconscious impact their employees at work?
Okay, that's a
That's a
very
big
powerful.
question, I know, but I just threw it out there to you to dive in, I suppose, first into the subconscious. And, there again, it's not maybe a word that we talk about, because managers sometimes don't have the people skills that they need, because they might have started as a receptionist and they work their way up through the company, which is absolutely wonderful. But then if they didn't get the adequate training, or they haven't got their own personal work done, they might not understand about the subconscious. And I think this is where sometimes leaders can do with, hearing conversations like this, or delving into their own subconscious to understand themselves better.
100%. And it's a great question, because I think that most leaders actually think and believe that they're communicating well. Most people, in fact, most people that I meet, we believe that we're communicating well, and we are on a conscious level. But what often happens is we miss the subconscious impact that the words have on the people around us, right? So we don't know, or we forget, we don't know, we may have heard it said that 95% of our thoughts, our decisions, our emotions are driven by the subconscious. So what actually happens? We say something, let's say you're leading a team, we say something to our team, and they hear the words, but their subconscious, not their conscious, is picking up lots of other stuff, the energy, the tone, and kind of what's said underneath, reading between the lines. So I sometimes call this like the invisible programming in a workplace culture, right? So, for example, think about how leaders might often say something which they feel is really beneficial. Something like, I know you're going to smash this. You always give 110%, right? Now that sounds positive. It sounds positive, but depending on who the person is, subconsciously, that praise could cause pressure. The employee might actually hear, oh, whoops, if I don't over deliver, I'm going to fail. So sometimes we can trigger stress. We can trigger things in the people that we're hoping and wanting to lead without even realizing it, because we're focused on the words and not the impact. So the way that how do we change that? Most of all, it starts with awareness. It starts with checking in. It starts with, before you speak, taking a breath, pausing and asking yourself, am I speaking more from a place of pressure, or of fear, or empowerment? Right? So for an example of that would be like shifting from sentences such as, a big one that we often say, and we think that we mean well on a conscious level, we mean well, and we might say something like, don't stress, don't worry about it. It's the worst thing that we can say. The worst thing for our subconscious. Ironically, the brain will focus on the word stress, when we say don't stress, because it doesn't process a negative. So understanding how your subconscious communication works is really, really powerful. So knowing how the subconscious works gives us a huge advantage about from other leaders and wanting to manage our team, motivate our team, inspire our team, et cetera, et cetera. So when we use a negative, like don't think about, don't worry about it, don't stress, we're actually causing that. So the mind focuses on the word that comes after the don't. Okay. So instead, we want to give what we'd call in hypnotic terms a more direct command. So we might say, instead of don't stress, we might say, you've got this, or focus on this, or focus on what matters most, or you're more direct with your command, and that's much more beneficial. So the brain moves towards where language directs it. Okay, so empowering language literally rewires your team's subconscious responses. So you're activating rather than triggering. So you're creating trust, and trust is a big part of what I teach. Is the subconscious loves to feel safe. So can we create environments that the person feels subconsciously safe in? Okay, and there are ways to do that, by the way, lots of ways to do that, instead of causing fight or flight. Actually, one of the easiest ways to do that is to get the person imagining doing well. This is a great, great trick. When you use words, and these are magical words for using with your team, is just simply imagine. Just simply imagine we've done this. Just simply imagine you've completed this. You've got the results that you want. You've done a really good job. How does it feel? Once you've done that with your team member, now one, you've got them to create the end result in their mind. So hence it's easier to do it again. But two, what you've done is something really smart. You've bypassed the resistance of that the number one subconscious mind wants to do. The subconscious mind's number one job is to keep you safe. So it does not like the familiar. So once you've made something familiar, like you've completed the job, you've done really good, you've had the success, you've led this project, I'm really happy with the work that you've done. Once you've created that result in the person's mind, help them create it by saying, just simply imagine we've done this, la la la. Then they've already experienced it inside here. And once they've experienced it inside here, the brain now thinks, oh, we've already gone there, because it doesn't know the difference between what's real or imagined. So it feels safer. So you're creating instant safety, a feeling of safety instead of fight or flight. So that's why one of the things, and I know this is very relative to the work that you do, Dolores, one of the things that I say, communication is well-being. Communication is well-being. Your words aren't just describing the culture, they're creating it moment by moment. Your words matter. So I honestly believe that every natural leader, every want-to-be leader, anyone who aspires to be a great leader should have something like a post-it on their desk, on their laptop, that says something like, your words are programming your reality, use them wisely. So I hope that kind of somewhat answers your question.
Yeah, totally. I could listen to that forever because it is so true. It's our words are like magic spells, we're creating our reality. And again, that might not sound practical, but as you say there, it's like the brain doesn't differentiate between the two. And it's creating that feeling of what we want rather than creating the feeling of what we don't want. And I think we're not really taught that at a young age. So what I'd like to ask you now is like, how would you advise, a leader that's listening to this, let's say, and how do they catch their own limiting patterns on a day-to-day basis, let's say, when they know they want to change their own language, but they're not really familiar with this. This may be the first time hearing about the subconscious, but there are ways that we can see patterns.
100%. So, okay, so one of the most powerful ways that you can start to spot in real time how you're using your language, and to notice what you're using is to notice whether your language is certain or not. So again, very much related to what I just said about the brain, the subconscious loving to feel safe. When we create a culture of safety, I'll give you an example now. I don't have a corporate background, but I have a restaurant background. And, I had about 100 staff over my 3 restaurants. And one of the things that staff members used to say to me was, they actually used to say to me, we feel safe. I feel safe when you're here. Now, they didn't mean I am a black belt, but they didn't mean in that capacity, but they meant that when I was in the room on the floor with them, right, they felt like someone had them, was kind of like knew what they were doing. And in fact, that wasn't just with the team, with my staff, it was also with the clients, with the customers. When you create an environment where people feel like you've got them, you can do that by observation. You do that by being awake, alert, you're clued in, and that creates a lovely feeling for the people around you. So as a leader, if you're leading a team, that is such an important aspect, to make your team feel safe, that you've got them, you're on their side, you're holding them, you've got their back. Now, in language, that transmutes, I don't know if that's a word, into certainty, rather than if. So, for example, words like I'll try. I'll try is not certain.
Yeah.
I'll try implies failure to the subconscious mind. Because the subconscious literally takes it literally. So when you use the word I'll try, the subconscious, or as I call them, the little people inside your head, will say, oh, okay, we're not going to do, or she's not going to do, or he's not going to do. So if you say as a leader to your team member, and you say, oh, I'll try and do that, that doesn't naturally, that's not going to cause them to feel safe. They don't feel any certainty. Or if they say that to you and you're the leader, they're not going to do it. That is definitely not a response that you want to hear. If someone says, I'll try, to me, I know they're not doing it. So words like hopefully, hope is another one. I prefer trust, right? I trust in, or, hopefully is very weak. I have to. That comes from pressure, right? It doesn't come from choice. Okay. Or we're under pressure. Again, that's heavy, that's hard. So words that, that seem harmless, but they kind of tell the subconscious mind that either we're in pain or suffering, or we're in uncertainty. So these are words that signal doubt, they signal pressure, they signal lack of self-sovereignty, right? So, and they program the brain, either in you or in the person that you're speaking to want to stay away, or to not go with it. So the practice kind of instead becomes more of reacting, to pause. We want to get better at this. You pause and you ask, like, what do I want to say that is really going to create that feeling of safety? So, like, am I reinforcing the fear, or am I causing them to feel safe? Am I planting doubt, or making them feel certain? Am I creating that safety, or, and clarity? So instead of I'll try, you might say, I will do. I will get it done by. I will update you. I will follow up with this on, or something that happens sometimes is we put too much pressure on ourselves. So we might say, instead of saying I'll try, and we think, okay, I have to say I'm going to do it. So I'm going to say I will do it. Maybe we say, like, okay, I'll check in with you on this date, or something that happened to me is, and I really realized this, that I wasn't serving people well, like that sometimes people would come to talk to me and I didn't have time, right? And like, you might be giving a talk, for example, or a presentation, and people want to ask you a question, and maybe you don't have enough time because you're only, you want to say yes, but you don't have enough time. So instead, give a confident answer. Like, I could give you a really short answer now, but it won't be as succinct, or won't be as in depth as I'd like to go with you. So how about instead I I answer this question for you tomorrow when I have more time and I can really think about it and give you a really precise answer. So when you come with the certainty and the answer, the solution to the problem with certainty, people will feel that. And so will your team. You don't have to have all the answers, but as long as they know that you're coming with that certainty, they will feel safe. So the fastest way to build this, we could say, mental muscle is often kind of like watching and listening to people that speak this language naturally. Mirroring them, listening, watching leaders who are really in their power and their strength, listening to this and becoming more aware of it, changing the I'll tries to more certain words, changing the energy to more certainty, pausing and becoming aware. That's really ultimately, I believe, the first step in this process.
Oh, wonderful. So there again, I often say, like, building a workplace culture, it doesn't always have to be big, grand gestures. And again, I think that you've highlighted that when we're talking about how we can change team dynamics, because again, it's small, simple things. It's the way we communicate, and it's about changing a shift there from uncertainty to just something more positive. So I love that, because I think that's huge. It doesn't have to be, oh, I have to go off now and send my team on training for communication. We can sort of say, let's try this first. Let's be proactive with how we talk. And I love doing the exercise, the above and the below line when I do training on communication, where we're always trying to avoid bringing people into their subconscious, because we don't know how people are going to react, because we don't know everyone's story, nor do we need to on our teams. We just always strive to bring people above the line, and the way we ask questions, we ask them in such a way that we're not triggering. There are more open questions than that. So I wrote down the word boundaries here, because when we become assertive like that with our language, there is that thing about respecting our own boundaries. And you touched on that, because you're talking about not having to always know the answer, because nobody always knows the answer. But then there's that fear factor, and you did talk about the whole psychological safety. If we feel we can trust those around us, then we can be more open and more honest to say, look, I don't know the answer to that. Can you talk a little bit about personal boundaries around this topic as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we have to lead ourselves first.
Yeah, I love it.
100%. And as I said, my story was I fell into this, business career because of my own personal development first. And I believe for us to become good leaders, it always, always starts with ourselves. So that includes boundaries. We cannot establish, good boundaries with other people if we haven't established them with ourselves first. So, I know self-sovereignty is a big word as such.
I love that word.
It's a great word, absolutely. And kind of my second life, we could say, since the restaurant businesses, has been all about establishing my own self-sovereignty first. And I believe that that's the most natural step to leading others. So that comes into our boundaries. And I again, without sounding fluffy, our self-worth is linked with our boundaries. So the stronger the better the leader I've become is completely in proportion with how many boundaries I have placed for myself. Not to limit people, but to open myself up to it. And a little bit like the story that I shared about not answering the questions after, say, a talk. For example, say like I was a late, sometimes, I might have give a talk, at an event and or my own event, and it's gone on till 9 p.m. in the evening, and we're tired and everybody's tired. And instead of trying to answer everyone's questions and it going on for half the night and people hanging around and getting exhausted and me being exhausted and not giving a great answer, it's better for me to have strong boundaries in place and know that and say to myself, I'm going to respect myself and I'm going to respect the others. and wait until my energy is replenished and I'm able to give a really, really comprehensive answer. So I have 100% learned, because previously, before the age of 36, when I had my restaurants, I had no boundaries, no
Mm.
boundaries. And it meant I was running around like a busy fool, because I had also no self-worth. So I didn't value myself enough to say, okay, I'm going to put myself first. I'm going to say no more. I'm going to be able to compartmentalize and give myself time, put my health, my well-being, etc. first, and then I'll be replenished, energized, and I'll be able to give much more. We're doing a disservice, 100% of a disservice to others, when we do not establish boundaries on ourselves first. So like those things are all relevant. They're all in correlation to helping you to become a great leader. And I believe that to become a great leader, we kind of have to be tested. We kind of have to be tested ourselves and go through our own journey. And before we kind of recognize and realize, okay, whoops, I gotta create better boundaries so I can actually open myself up more, because if we don't have boundaries, we're constantly being bombarded, right? A lot of people think boundaries is like closing ourselves up, but I believe boundaries opens us up, because when we have no boundaries, we're bombarded. So we're actually in attack mode, well, in self-defense mode, because we're bombarded by stuff. But when we have really great boundaries in place, and these particular disciplines of being able to do these different things, then we are more open. We feel safer. We feel safer. So we are more receptive. So hence we're more expansive, and hence we're able to be more aware of what's happening around us. Because if we're in defense mode, we're blinkered. If we're feel safe, we're open and receptive, and we can be more welcoming to the people that need to come into our life, that want to come into the life, the people that we want to help. So it's a completely different ball game of how we feel energetically and the response that we will get from others. So it's totally interlinked.
Yeah, and the reason I love the word, the whole word said sovereignty is what. Sorry, I didn't say that right. Sovereignty bit is that, really stepping into your power. I became an assertive coach at a certain time in my life where, because I had no boundaries, and I'm glad it happened to me, because again, no more than yourself. I mean, we all have a backstory, and we have a choice whether we change or we don't. Do you? Sometimes people say, in relationships, I'm a doormat. Well, we get up off the ground, and it's hard to do it at times, but sometimes our challenges and the getting up off the ground, the changing, makes us stronger. So I became an assertive coach because I had no boundaries. I was bullied in an office in my mid-30s, and that was my catalyst for change. And that's why I'm so passionate about doing the work I do and bringing it into workplaces, because I talk a lot about, feeling seen, heard, and feel like I belong. If you're feeling isolated in some sort of way, or whatever it's panning out for you, then, and you don't speak up because you're not assertive, you're not standing in your power. And assertiveness is not, there's three ways we act in relation to our power. We're passive aggressive, we're aggressive, or we're assertive. Assertiveness is where we have our boundaries in place. We know what we'll accept and we know what we want. And in a loving way, we speak. My
Yeah.
circumstance in a workplace gave me the opportunity to say, I need to do something about this, because I was getting a similar, experience. And it's not that it's going to go away forever. And something similar was kind of brewing last year, but I had the tools to realize, to understand my boundaries were being rattled again, and to walk away. So that's why I brought up the whole boundary situation, because I think, like yourself, those challenges and getting over them do make us stronger.
100%. There's sometimes I use a little metaphor and a little story about this. And, I believe that each of us has our journey, right? And to be, as I said, a strong leader, we've got to lead ourselves first. We've always got to lead ourselves first. And I've used many analogies in the past about being a black belt. And, it's only when I received my black belt that I actually realized that the journey had only begun when I received my black belt. Everyone's striving for the black belt, the end result. But when you get your black belt, it's kind of like, oh, whoops, Now I'm the black belt. Now everybody's looking at me in a different way. Now I've got to perform. I've got to be good. I've got to be the teacher, the one that knows it all. I've got to be the black belt. So now the pressure is really on to be the natural leader, the teacher, the help, the one that does all of this, that leads the way. So the pressure actually sometimes starts when you become the leader. So to become the leader, it's about really understanding the whole process rather than just wanting the result. And this relates to kind of to close this up together. There's a quote I heard once, and it's this, and it's wonderful. Leaders are bridges and bridges are tested. Leaders are bridges and bridges are tested. And it's such a great analogy because if we want to lead people over our bridge, right? If we want to lead people over the bridge, no one's going to come over the bridge if your bridge hasn't been tested. Do they want to? Would you want them to? Like, you wouldn't want them to, because your bridge needs to be tested under pressure. The foundations need to be tested. So everything that you've done in your life, everything that you've been through has made you the leader that you are. So that's why I really believe that it's the people that have had the greatest, and sometimes the hardest journeys become the strongest leaders because they have more empathy, they have more understanding, they've been there, but they have grown their bridge, their structure, their foundations are now strong. Their boundaries are in place. Whereas if you haven't really been tested, then then your bridge, your foundations haven't been tested, and nobody's going to want to come over that bridge.
I love it. That's such a wonderful metaphor, and it's so easy to understand. There again, it's lovely when you say things in a way that's so easy for people to understand. Now, what would you think is kind of going away from all those topics? What do you think the biggest misconception people have about communication in the workplace is?
Great quote that I love, and it's this.
Oh, I
The
love the
single,
quotes.
the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Okay, expand on that for us.
Most people think they're communicating effectively. Most people are nice, polite, well, not everybody, but some people are well spoken. You think you're saying the right words, but like I said, we're not really communicating. We're saying words like should. You should do this. You need to do this. They're immediately reactive. They're triggering. They're words that will cause a resistance. Instead of using the most powerful word in the world, the word want. We all do things that we want to do. We don't think if we all did things that we should, we'd have no unhealthy people. We'd have, we'd have no bad habits, because ultimately we are creatures that do things that we want to do. So knowing how to use words really powerfully in a subconscious way, is I believe that 99.9% of the planet don't know that. They actually don't know how to use words powerfully. We're caught up in what we've been taught from school, but we're not taught the other 95% of communication. So I believe often we're listening, but we're not. We're listening to interrupt. We're listening to say our piece. We're not watching. We're not watching all the cues. Words are only 7%. We're not watching the body language. We're not clued into that. We're not clued into the tone, the pitch, the rhythm. We're not clued into what's happening subconsciously. The way the people gesticulates tells you everything that's going on in their inside world. The way their eyes goes tells you stuff. There's all these cues that we're missing. And when we understand these, when we learn these, your world expands. It's literally like you've tapped into another evolvement of communication. And that's kind of my mission, is to help people realize that we're only on a two-dimensional communication, and there's a whole other level of this.
Oh, I love it. We could talk all day, but the good news is that Danielle is speaking at an event I'm running in Galway on April the 25th, a morning event in conjunction with IBEX National Workplace Wellbeing Day. Danielle, you're going to be talking on the stage as well. And as well as talking, you are going to be leading people on a hypnotic visualization, which is not just a nice little journey to feel good. Tell us more about that, because I'm excited to hear this.
Well, again, for the people who are skeptic, for who, maybe doesn't believe in hypnosis or visualization or this kind of thing, I just want to say, like, we're always hypnotizing ourselves, always influencing. Anyone can be hypnotized is anyone who can be influenced, and anyone who can be influenced is anyone that can learn. If you can learn something, then you can be influenced, and then you are being hypnotized, just not consciously. You're just not aware. So we're always being influenced. That's how marketing works. That's how advertising works. That's how all of these things work. We're always being influenced, and we're always open to learning, right? So what I want to do is maybe implant in a really beautiful way some deep messages to help inspire you, empower you, help you bring more calmness, more well-being, more joy, more ease into your life, into your workplace, into your well-being. And I will do that. I'm a hypnotist. I teach these skills. I teach this sort of communication, and I will do this with love, with kindness, with gentleness, to bring you and very often it's the people that think nothing's happened, because I often say we want to distract the guards at the gate. We want to distract that conscious mind, that mind, the guards at the gate that are trying to so much to filter information and protect everything. But I kind of tend to like to distract those guards and get in the back door, so that I can put some lovely, positive, subliminal well-being messages to help you have a nicer day, a nicer, better relationships, better life. And that's my aim. That's what I'm going to do at the event.
I love it. And you talked about confidence as well, that's and that's a huge thing, I think, when we have confidence. And I'm going to go back and listen to that, the difference between confidence and self-worth. I'm going to take that out and make a little snip on it, and I'm going to post it again in its own, because I think that's very important to understand that difference between confidence and self-worth, so that we can understand better.
Yeah.
So Danielle, do you want to let people know where they can connect with you?
Yeah.
Well, it's coming to Galway to the event to hear you, of course, but where if they want to meet you online, where they can find you?
That's what I was going to say. Come to the event and meet me in person. But yeah, absolutely. Danielle Serpico. I'm half Irish, half Italian, so there's not too many Serpicos. Like Al Pacino in the film.
Love
So,
it.
so Danielle Serpico, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at the blackbeltmastermind.com. So it's all about you becoming the black belt of your mind. So the blackbeltmastermind.com, and yeah, I'm fairly easy to look up. Danielle Serpico, the Black Belt Mastermind. You'll find me anywhere, everywhere.
I love it. And thank you so much for a very, very insightful conversation this morning. Really looking forward to having to coming to Galway, because I think you add that piece. There's various different conversations at the event. It's all about workplace, but it's different. People are talking about different things. But at the end of the day, it's all about, again, no matter, like, we have HR professionals, we have solopreneurs, we have business leaders, managers, all sorts of delegates attending. But at the end of the day, we're all people. We all have a subconscious mind. So we're all going to glean information, whether it's for ourselves to help us personally, or whether it's to bring the information back to our teams. So I'm delighted that you're involved in the conversation and bringing in this huge piece that incorporates so much and guiding on this visualization to show people exactly that this is something that you're not going to you're going to walk away with having got something from your talk,
Yeah.
as in, like, you'll be guiding us, and you'll be helping us reframe what's holding us back.
You'll
Danielle,
leave differently. You will leave differently. You will leave the event in a different emotional state, and with a brighter future.
Danielle, thank you so much for being here. Pleasure as always talking to you, and see you in Galway.